Hello everyone. It is nice. Thanks for coming. This year we are doing our events differently. This is our virtual uh, uh, bringing nature home, habitat restoration, and invasive species removal webinar with Meera Dyer and from Ulfan Park and Kiran Bhattrai from Oprik Wall with the part of the 2River Festivals 2020. Before we get started, I'm going to start the land acknowledgement, and I'll pass it over to Rebecca. We would like to acknowledge and give thank you to all of Indigenous steward of this territory who have protected the land and waterways for centuries. We would like to offer our gratitude and respect to the Mississauga of the Credit, whose treaty territory we are currently occupying, as well as to the Atawandran, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee people, whose traditional land are connected to what is now known as Guelph City, Ontario. We also recognize our Inuit and Métis neighbors and other Indigenous peoples who have gathered on this land. Acknowledging the land and the people whose land we is only one part of the process of decolonization. We must actively continue to our work on building relationships that respect, honor, and value the culture, tradition, and wisdom of those who have lived here since time immemorial. A land acknowledgement doesn't exist in the past tense because colonialism is a current ongoing process, and we need to be mindful of our present participation in that process. Now, Rebecca will start briefly about the 2River Festivals 2020.
Okay, so once again, big thank you for hosting the invasive species pull competition. Big thank you to Kiran and Meera. And then I just want to talk a bit about the 2Rivers. So it is to celebrate the Speed and Eramosa rivers, and the whole festival is organized and run by volunteers and involves many community organizations. So we really hope that you support these organizations that are doing good work in our community, as well as also support the advertisers and our event sponsor, which is the Guelph Outdoor School Community. And without them, we wouldn't have been able to run this festival this year. So big thank you to them. And there are 40 other more events that we have, or 40 events we have in total. So please do check them out for the ones that you're interested in. And as well, there is also a photo competition. So for this event, if you could tag at 2Rivers Festival and use the hashtag 2Rivers photo, and any photo you upload relating to the festival, even if you go outside and do something that's related to the event, you take a picture and you want to share it, those photos we do use for next year's festival. So you will be entered into a competition if you do decide to participate. All right, so I'm going to pass it back to Meera, and she's going to continue on talking about the event.
No, I'm talking.
Yes, you can. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, I am Kiran Bhattrai and the right corner. My name is Kiran. I'm working as a Speed River project coordinator and office coordinator at Oprik Guelph since a long time. And Meera, can you introduce?
Yeah, I'm Meera. So I'm a teacher and a mom of 3 kids. And Karen and I have done a lot of work together in the Wolfond Park neighborhood. And I grew up just outside of Bancroft in the forest. Our nearest neighbor was about 1 kilometer away. And so I loved running around in the woods. And then just recently, in the last 5 years, I've been really interested in how we can build nature and restoration here in the city. So that's a lot of what this presentation is about. Thanks, Kieran.
Thank you, Mira. It's already, I want to say thank you to your all hard work you did already put in the Ulpan Park area and then in the community, and then just like taking leadership after the Swiss meets, she handed to you to take care of those things. Thank you so much for, and then I'm really enjoying working with Mira. On behalf of the Oak Ridge Golf, we really like to thank you so much for the Ulpan Park community neighborhoods too. My name is Kiran. I'm from OPRIC Golf. OPRIC is a stand for Ontario Public Interest Research Group, Golf. It was established in 1976 as a public interest research group at the University of Guelph. We are volunteer-based, not-for-profit organization, focuses on social and environmental issues. What we do, OPRIC works for strengthening the link between University of Guelph and local communities in addressing issue of environmental and social justice in the community. OPRIC major works involves collaboration and partnering with campus and community groups. We also provide resources like Radical Research Library, providing training, funding opportunities, running various river restoration programs through Speed River Project. OPRIC also provides funding and supports individuals and groups wishing to undertake their new initiatives on the issue of the environmental and social justice. Since 1976, OPRIC Golf also has played an instrumental role in many local and global environmental and social justice campaigns. For details, you want to visit our website, www.opricgolf.org. Okay, today's, okay, sorry, I just, webinar guidelines. Please keep your mic muted. We will have an opportunity for questions and we'll send a webinar recording out after the event. Today's webinar starts. We'll teach you what are invasive species and how they came to Canada, and garlic mustard, European buckthorn, and Japanese knotweed. Especially, we're talking lots of other invasive. Mira will be talking. What can we do for the control, and then brief introduction of the Japanese knotweed I'm going to give, and where are the hot spots in Gulf area, and what are the steps to careful to remove them, and picture of the invasive species and pull and plant, and garlic mustard can use as a food. That was the event we run already. You can check it out. And habitat restoration, invasive plant in Gulf, and an adult its impact about its impact on native species, how they that and is important pollinator garden, and then rebuilding habitats for our garden and parks. And then all those resources will live with you. There are volunteer opportunities also. Okay, now invasive plant species. What are invasive plant? I'm going to talk about that. Invasive plant come from the outside this geographic area, and they are not native to the local area. They are brought to as a landscaping, forest, ornamental, livestock, fencing, erosion control, wildlife habitat, and accidentally they came to the other land. They grew rapidly, mature quickly, produce lots of seeds, and aggressively spread by roots or suckers, and disrupt established ecosystem, forcing our native plants. Pure native plants results in decreasing biodiversity. This makes less food and habitat for wildlife dependent on native plants. Not all introduced exotic plants are not invasive. Some, like the many common garden plants, are even more beneficial. Why they are invasive, I will tell you later. What they do, what the really invasive species do. Invasive plants are concerned because they compete too aggressively, and they outcompete native species and force out native vegetation. They have high seed production capacity and quickly establishment of the colonies and have their capacity to tolerate to a wide range of growing conditions and lack of natural predators to keep their population under control in their new environment. They don't have a more pathogen and predators. Some plants change soil nutrient levels, degrade soil structure, and alter the habitat succession, so that they put our native fish, plants, and animals and their habitat at risk. What we can do: learn how to identify invasive plant and how to avoid accidentally spreading this invasive plant through its root, fragment, and then seeds. We have to learn how to effectively manage invasive species on your property, and never buy or plant invasive species, which is against the law to buy, sell, trade, propagate, or purposely grow in our area, because it's the Canadian bylaw. Stay on designated trail and then keep pets on a leash. Leaving trail or entering area containing invasive species can encourage their spread of this plant. When leaving an area containing invasive species, inspect, clean, and remove mud, seeds, and plant parts from clothing, pets, vehicles, and equipments, and then tools. Do not compost invasive species in your backyard and then composter. Seeds and roots stem could survive and grow in compost. Share this information with your neighbors, friends, and family. The more people who know about the invasive plants, it will be easier to spread of the invasive species. Japanese knotweed, garlic mustard, and European buckthorns, these three main species are major concern in our area. And these today I'm going to talk briefly about the knotweed, how it came and how can we identify and how it can spread. Those three pictures are: first one is Japanese knotweed, and second one is garlic mustards, and third one is European buckthorn. Mira will be showing all those details pictures after that. I'm just talking about the Japanese knotweeds. It says, which is from the buckwheat Polygonaceae family. It is an invasive species. Is an aggressive semi-woody perennial plants. It is native to Eastern Asia, like Japan, Korea, China, and Taiwan. It was introduced to North America as a horticulture plant in the late 19th century and was widely planted as an ornamental for the purpose of the erosion control and the forage for the livestock. The majority of the sites in Ontario have been reported in the last 10 to 20 years. But a distribution of this plant is not very well documented in Ontario. I have been seeing Japanese knotweed in Open Park and then Eramasar Trail since 12 years here, because I was living here 13, 14 years. How to identify these plants? It's a herb and 2 to 4 meters in height. There are no similar kind of native plants around this area. If you know this characteristic, you can identify easily. It looks like bamboo, however, it is easily distinguished. 1 to 3 meters in height. Stems are round, reddish purple, smooth, and have a bamboo-like appearance. Leaves are ovate, flower are greenish white. Fruits is small and white with wing that help to disperse seeds to new sites. Seeds are brown and shiny. It has very vigorous root systems which can spread nearly 10 meters from the parent stem and can grow through concrete and asphalt as well as. It is so difficult to control. And its habitat is, it grows in moist and wet soil found in wetlands, watercourses, along the riverbank, along the roadside, and near old buildings or former building sites, and the garden also we can find. How to spread how the Japanese knotweeds can spread. It spreads quickly, creating dense thicket and degraded habitats, and reduce plant biodiversity by competing with other native vegetation. Thick layer of decomposing stem and leaves on the ground make it difficult for a native plant to plant species to establish. And they are aggressive plant with a strong root system that has been known to break through asphalt and then concrete. It can establish along riverbank where pieces of the roots can break off and then float downstream to the start new population. That's why it is so sensitive. Hot spots in the Gulf is along the Eramosa and Speed River. If you can walk along the Eramosa from Cover Bridge towards the Victoria Road, close to the waterworks office, along the north bank of the Eramosa River, you can see the loss of around 50 by 50 square, more than, no, it is around 200 by 200 meter square area is covered. This is my guess. It's a big area and it's totally covered by the Japanese knotweed. And then other area is east side of the Speed River bank around the, it is a orphan park. And there is also lots of Japanese knotweed. We started to pulling since long time, but still there a lot. Here are the pictures and video of the removing invasive plants and then planting native wildflower restoration. I can show you. I don't know. Those are the pictures. One is where this is the Japanese knotweed we pull up from the open park. I don't know. I can't. Here is the one. Those are the garlic mustard pool, and those are the some of them are Buckthorn baggies application on the steam. Those are the control we are doing, and one of the picture is we make the garlic mustard pesto workshop. Those are the ingredients I'm showing here. If you are interested to know how to make a garlic mustard pesto, you can click our events on 2Rivers festivals on May 9. May 6. We run that one. And I have one picture here when we just in a spring we planted those wildflowers on the where we pull the garlic mustards, and then next time it comes like this. I can just show this video if you wanna was here. I don't know. Very short video, and then same thing is here, and the next time when we can you see Mira nicely?
Yeah, it's very nice, Karen. That's what happened after, right?
Those are the when we planted those after the planting wildflower species. This is really nice.
Oh, it's
the
beautiful.
same area I'm showing the comparison.
Yeah.
Lots of wildflowers. It's very nice in a fall. That was it's new fall. It's really nice.
Yeah.
And all those the clear plastic bags are garlic mustard. We had last year's or year before, I guess. Those are the garlic mustard pool, and then pesto making workshops collection.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the pictures. Sorry. No. I try to. Okay, now I would like to pass this to Mira. She's going to talk about how can we build the garden, pollinator garden, and then all those basic things.
That's great, Karen. Thanks. Do you want to just let me share my screen? Is that okay?
Sure.
Wonderful. Thank you. All right. So I'm just going to skip down here. And there we go. Okay, so just Bringing Nature Home by Doug Tallamy. I found this book very, very inspiring. And a lot of the information that I got for this part of the presentation draws from his research. So by planting native plants, we create valuable habitat that the animals we care about need to survive. A native plant is a grass, flower, shrub, or tree that's been here for thousands of years and evolved relationships with other species. So this is really our goal for habitat restorations is we pull the invasive plants and the non-native plants and then we plant natives. So why? We can no longer rely on the natural areas outside of our cities to provide the habitat needed for wildlife because it doesn't exist. 70% of the forests along the eastern seaboard of North America are now gone. Compare this to 15% of the Amazon. We paved over 43,480 square miles to create roads between 1982 and 1997 in North America. We removed habitat and replaced it with over 40 million acres of suburban lawns, which most species find unfortunately uninhabitable. It's no surprise that in southern Ontario, 30% of our butterfly species are threatened, 12% of our birds are on the verge of extinction, and this number is unfortunately rising. Now, it doesn't have to be this way. Many species can coexist happily beside us in our own yards and backyards and our parks. In Europe, pollinator populations are on the decline. However, in Amsterdam, and I found this exciting, in a city of 2.3 million, they have had an increase in the local bee population by 45%. They reintroduced native plants in public gardens, in home gardens, and previously unused grass areas. They banned the use of chemical pesticides and encouraged homeowners to create insect hotels. By 2015, 21 species of bees not previously found in the city were present, and yeah, I find this inspiring. So on average, native plants and trees support 75% more species than non-native plants. A native oak, pictured here, are top of the list, and one red or white oak will support 517 different species of butterflies and moths. Willow is next, followed by cherry, plum, birch, and poplar, and a lot of these species are what we try to put in our parks. The reason they create habitat is because insects require native plants to survive. So insects are the primary method of taking energy from plants and moving it up the food chain. They eat the plants and then everything else eats them. This includes birds. So 96% of birds require insects to feed their young. An adult chickadee needs between 390 and 570 caterpillars per day to feed a growing clutch of chicks. They weigh only 1 ounce. Imagine what a woodpecker baby would need. But caterpillars, along with 90% of other insects, are specialized. This means there's only a narrow lineage of plants that they can eat, lay their eggs, and complete their life cycle with. The caterpillar of the monarch is a specialist on milkweed, which we all know, but why? So milkweeds defend their tissues with a milky latex sap, and I'm sure you're familiar with that gels on exposure to air. So insects that attempt to eat milkweed leaves soon find that their mouth parts are glued permanently shut by the sap. Monarchs, however, block the flow of sap to milkweed leaves. And this ability to detoxify cardiac glycosides and block latex sap in milkweeds does not, unfortunately, confer the ability to disarm the chemical defenses found in other plant lineages. It took thousands of years for this relationship between the monarch and the milkweed to develop. So this means that of the 2,137 native plant genre, a monarch can only develop on one of these. And if milkweeds disappear, so do the monarchs. And monarchs are not exceptions. The reason I'm talking about this is because all butterflies are like this. They all have their own host plant. Okay, so this is our example of our caterpillar and the monarch. So this is a Luna moth, and the Luna moth, its host plant is a birch tree, a white birch tree. So the specialization of one or two lineage of plants is typical of 90% of insects that eat plants. As I mentioned, this specialization takes thousands of years to develop. This is the reason why so few of our insects can use introduced plants. There's just a few, crabapple, some herbs, they can be used, but the rest of them, they're not very helpful. Without native plants, there are very few insects. And why does this matter? Because without insects, the rest of the food chain collapses. Thus, if we want to mitigate species extinction, we have to start with native plants because they support native insects, which then support everything else. That's why we want to get rid of all of our invasive plants, or not all, but we try. Okay, so some introduced plants, so this is an example of the butterfly bush, which some people may recognize. They do provide nectar and pollen, which is good. However, if there's only the butterfly bush, we would have no butterflies because there's not one that can use this as a host plant. None of their caterpillars can eat it. So the relationship between plants and actually butterfly bush can become invasive as well. So the relationship between plants and insects take thousands of years to develop, as you can see, between the monarch and the milkweed. Phragmites, you probably recognize this one, is a wetland reed from Europe and is found in ditches everywhere. Despite being here for 500 years, it was likely used as a packing material in the holds of the earliest sailing ships. It provides food and shelter to only 5 native insect herbivores. Adaptation is happening, but it's at a glacial rate. Like, it's been here for 500 years. Compare this to 170 species in its homeland. So at its home, it supports a lot, but here it doesn't. And Phragmites is not an exception. Garlic mustard is the same. Buckthorn is the same. Okay, so Kieran already gave a wonderful explanation of invasive plants. So that's great. They're just non-native species that displace native plant communities, as she said. Okay, so invasive species do complicate matters, and a lot of them were brought over, as she was mentioning, even just in our own horticulture. A lot of them were brought over even because they resist insects, so they really do not provide habitat. And some people would wonder, well, why are they not good? Don't they increase our plant diversity? In some ways, yes. There are more kinds of plants here now than before. As mentioned, though, our insects have not evolved with these introduced plants. They cannot use them to complete their life cycle. Thus, in areas with many invasives, such as up here, in areas with many invasives, there's a lot less biodiversity there. So in one study conducted by Doug Tallamy, he compared an invasive plant hedgerow with a native plant hedgerow. In the native hedgerow, there were 68% more caterpillar species and 91% more caterpillars altogether. So that would support a whole lot more birds. This does not include, of course, the dozens of species that depend on these caterpillars. The use of introduced plants is one of the factors that has caused the decline in 432 species of birds in North America. So it is a lot of work. To remove invasive species, it can take a long time and be physically intensive. However, it's worth it. Even if we only choose a small area to combat, removing invasives and planting natives will increase exponentially species number and diversity in that place. And sometimes I find just choosing a small area makes it feel doable, right? So two other ones that I'll speak about here are European buckthorn and garlic mustard. So this is garlic mustard here. It was brought over from Europe, most likely from the British Isles. It is an edible, which is why Kieran was mentioning about we can make it into pesto. It actually has a high degree of vitamin C. It lives for 2 years. So the first year plants, they look like this, and they're a rosette of dark green kidney-shaped leaves with scalloped edges. Okay. The second year plant starts to get some height up to about 1 meter, which you can see over here. Some of them, though, don't get that high if they're in the shade. In May, they produce white flowers followed by narrow seed pods which release hundreds of seeds. So right now, the flowers are just starting to come out. The second year plant dies after 1 year, or dies after the second year. So, and if you rub its leaves together, we can smell a really strong garlicky smell. So once you recognize it, you'll see it everywhere. If you, maybe you already know about it. And it is easy to feel overwhelmed. However, we can just choose an area that we care about and one that we think we can handle. The size, it doesn't really matter. So we want to pull all the mustard in the area that we've chosen before it drops its seeds. So this is from about the beginning of May to mid-June. The first year plants, we do need to pull out the roots. However, the second year plants, we can just cut them at the base. It doesn't matter if the roots stay because they're going to die anyway. And then we can place them in plastic bags. And as Kieran was mentioning, we don't want to compost the seeds as that lasts for many years. Hey, give me a minute. Yeah, here you go. Okay. Okay. So yeah, so this is a competition that we do every year. I'm sorry we can't do it this year, but a lot of the kids get involved, and they just come, and we have to, and they get prizes for how many bags of mustard that they can pull. And so this has been a wonderful thing we've been doing for about 7 years now, and really the garlic mustard has gone down quite a bit at Wolfond Park, and we've been planting natives with Kieran's help, with Oprig's help, and it really does make a big difference. So the second, another common invasive species is European buckthorn, which we can see here. Two identifiers that I find helpful are that the female produces these black berries. There's also male ones that don't produce the black berries, but the female ones do. And the buds look like goat hooves, kind of like this. You can see those. And they also have a thorn, a thorn between the two buds sometimes. Okay, so there's a few different buckthorn removal strategies. The key with buckthorn is we do have to get the roots. So after a rain, the small ones, after it's rained, we can just pull those out. When they get bigger, they're harder. So one tool that we like to use is this orange tool. It's called an extractivator. In Guelph, we can get them from the city. So we can use those to pull out the roots. Once they get bigger than this, then we can use a shovel, and that's a lot of work. We can also cut them down and put these baggies over top. And that works pretty well, but we have to keep an eye on it because the roots will sprout out from underneath it. Okay, so I'm just conscious of the time here. So in our own yards, I won't go into this in too much detail, but just we can also rebuild habitat in our parks as well as in our gardens. Okay. When we choose, so we can volunteer to help reweld a park, like what Kieran was suggesting there. When we choose, we can convert unused grass areas into pollinator gardens, and this can make a huge difference, just planting native plants in our gardens. It's important to try to plant, if we are going to plant in the park or in our homes, a great place to start is around the base of a tree. And that's because we can have a wonderful oak tree that supports all of this life. And then, however, most of the caterpillars fall to the ground, and they either make nests in the leaves or they burrow underneath the earth. And if it's grass, this can make it very, very difficult for those caterpillars to survive. So a great place to start a pollinator garden is underneath the base of a tree. This is just a quick shout out if anybody's interested in this. I am involved in another project called the Butterfly Way Project, where it's with the David Suzuki Foundation, and we're encouraging people in Guelph to plant 12 pollinator gardens. So if you're interested in that, my email's at the end, and we can help you with resources and probably some plants. Okay, so this is just a shout out to this book about restoring habitat at his garden. It's Planting in a Post-Wild World by Thomas Rayner and Claudia West. And they go into details just on design, like how to actually do the planting to support habitat. So this is for planting a forest or a woodland or a prairie. And the important thing is to do different layers, right? So if we're going to have the tree species and then the seasonal layer species and then the ground cover, that's really important because it covers the ground. The ground covers, their roots are different depths, so they can all work together. And it's the same when we're working in our park after we remove the invasive species. It's really great to do different levels as much as possible. Okay, and the other thing is just to make a shout out again for native plants. The most common shade tree in North America is now the Norway maple. It is invasive. We've got it on our streets all over the place here in Guelph. It will go into our parks and natural areas and replace the native ones. There's not one bird that will nest in a Norway maple. However, if we choose a sugar maple, which is just as beautiful, it can support 285 species of butterflies and moths. So just a little plug in for that. Just a little bit about tree species that support, the ones that support the most life. Again, it's oak, and the next one are all of our willows, not the weeping willow, that one's not native, and cherries. So this is in the book that I mentioned at the beginning. It's got a list of all the species that are supported by, and the number of species that they support. So oak, willow, cherry, birch, poplar, crabapple. And then for our herbaceous plants, it's goldenrod, asters, and native sunflowers are top for supporting wildlife. Actually, goldenrod can support up to 140, I think, different species, which I found an amazing statistic. Reducing outdoor light, that can make a big difference. We can choose motion sensor life instead, because the insects will go around the lights and get exhausted, and then a lot of them die, and also birds will come around and eat them in the morning after they're really tired. So it's another way to help increase our insect population. And finally, some people are concerned about insect damage to their plants, and I'm not talking about our home gardens. So this is different from our gardens, where our food gardens, but just our ornamental gardens. The native insects cause about 10% of damage. However, our native plants have evolved to support this. So one way to be okay with insect damage to our plants is just to take a couple steps back, and then we don't even see that. And hopefully, just with the increased number of birds and butterflies, it makes it worth it. Okay, so why native? Again, native plants are really important. They're fundamental to supporting all of our native ecosystems. Our insects need them, and insects are the primary way of moving the energy up the food chain. So for me personally, I want my kids to be able to grow up in a place where there's a lot of wildlife and birds. And we also know that more planting increases carbon sequestration. One oak tree will sequester 10 to 40 tons of carbon. They provide shade and help our watershed filter the air and support pollinators. So that's why. Okay, thanks. And now I guess here's the list of resource recommendations. And are there any final questions or comments or anything else that anybody would like to share? So I think I'll quit here. Okay. You can probably still see this screen, is that right? Okay, thanks. Perfect.
All right. Okay, so if you guys have any other questions, then just ask in the chat box, and we will be able to answer that for you. Or any comments about the presentation as well. Thank you again for that great presentation. And I just want to add that if any of you haven't had a chance to attend the Garlic Mustard Festival that was also hosted by OPERC, it's a great event, and there's a ton of garlic mustard seeds right now by the Speed River, just across the bridge behind the boathouse, and I picked some myself and made pesto the other day. That was absolutely delicious. So
wonderful.
Definitely take advantage of that.
Thank you so much. I made it 2 times.
Yeah, lots of recipes online.
So delicious, really. We have a recipe sharing on our event on May 6th.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
You can get from the 2River festivals. Still, I'm happy to share with you guys.
Thank you. Yeah.
And so if anyone has any final questions or remarks, then we will stay just for a couple more minutes.
Okay.
And 4:30 is when the meeting will end.
Perfect. We kept to the time. That's great.
Yeah. How long have you guys been with Oakberg for?
I have been with 14 years.
Wow. That is great.
Yeah. And then I have been planting 14 years here on
Mhm.
the river bank. Some of the trees are, what we planted, some big trees.
Right.
That's wonderful. Yeah,
And
Kieran and I
then,
started working together. So I'm not,
yeah.
I just volunteer with Oakberg.
Okay.
So we started working together about 5 years ago, Kieran, is that
Mhm.
right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so I just started becoming interested in garlic mustard removal, and then found out that Oakberg would help and provide plants as well as help to gather volunteers. So I
Mhm.
gather volunteers from our neighborhood, and Kieran helps because she can reach a wider audience number of people. So she'll bring in volunteers as well as help with with advertisement. And then we decide on the shrubs we're going to plant. So we do 2 events, right, Kieran? We do one
Yeah.
where we remove the garlic mustard and buckthorn, and then another where we
Mhm.
plant.
Sometimes we do the, casing to the plant, like there is a beaver, lots of beavers around the riverbank, and then they knock down the lots of trees, and we, put some, nets, mess around the trees. We do that too.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like Jason is just saying
Yeah.
that he's a volunteer with Reforest London. I'm very familiar with this topic. It's still very useful to
Mhm.
listen to since,
Oh,
okay, that's interesting. So it sounds like maybe you do a lot of invasive species removal as well in reforestation, eh?
if you have any, experience sharing to us, it would be great if you have
Yeah,
something. Share with us.
yeah.
We'll
Particularly, ground cover I don't know. It's always hard to find ground cover that'll go in over the garlic mustard after it's removed, because it is hard to get it established.
That's right. Also, does that get removed by the city or volunteers eventually? Because I remember last year, after a certain point, I went back to that area, and it was completely cleared of all the garlic mustard seeds, and I was like, what? There were so many.
Yeah,
Wow.
their seeds stay around the 5 years. That's why, it comes every year. It's never ending work.
Right.
It does help, yeah. So Oakberg does do it, and the city last year did get into removing buckthorn, which was wonderful.
Okay.
And then they had a whole program this year of replanting, and it's on hold. So.
And then the year before, also city, chopped down all the buckthorn trees along the Harati Creek. It is a kind of a buckthorn forest. I have a picture of the, video of the buckthorn forest, and then they chop just from the ground 6-inch stem, and then we started to collect the volunteer and put the buckthorn back. It is not very flat, and then the volunteers did good job, but it's still the lots of sprout come from the buckthorn baggies, and we are still working on there. And I did try experiment, planted a little bit bigger plant, then it will cover earlier than the buckthorn come up. That's why I put the lots of big size of the maple tree, sugar maple, and lots of other different varieties of the native plants along there. And then at least we can see the natives, even for the sprouting buckthorn come up, but there is a mix of the native and invasive. That also makes me happy.
Yeah, it looks like Jason said that he does a lot of work with buckthorn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Great.
So if that was it for everyone, then we are going to be wrapping this up. once again, thanks again for participating. Thank you to the hosts, and I hope everyone enjoys the rest of the day, takes advantage of, now that we're all stuck at home, hopefully more people get into gardening or community gardens, and also continue attending the 2Rivers festivals.